Yep.
Now you can share your screen if you're ready.
Okay. Yes. Well, she summed it up a whole lot more easily than I could have. I probably would have gone on, but that's about right. I learned that training as an emergency room nurse. That's basically my background, and I've done a few other things, including hospice. But that is where I got my training to begin with. Now, you guys can call it. You can call it serendipity. You can call it fate. I call it God, and I just firmly believe that God brought us together after all that time. I mean, I wasn't even supposed to be up there at that person's house for hospice. That was not my area. And I just got put up there, and I was moaning and groaning because I had to go all the way up to Wake Forest, and I lived in Cary. But this is what came of it anyway. So I feel I will, if I have time, I will read a part of my book, but I won't do that right now because that's not the important thing for me. I know that doesn't sound good. I'm not a very good salesman, but my idea for this book and my client's idea for this book was information, was public education is what we really had in mind. And if people buy the book, great. And if they don't, as long as they got something out of it, that's fine with me. So if I have time, I will read some, but it is available at all the online bookstores and also on Amazon Kindle. That's the one I recommend. If any of you have any people that are having a problem and are interested in this, I would highly recommend the Kindle. First of all, it's cheaper. And second of all, you don't want a book like this sitting around your house if you have somebody in your house that you're afraid of. So that's just my little piece of that. But where am I going? Okay, here we go. I think. There we go. All right. Intimate partner violence, it used to be called domestic violence, still is, but it's also called intimate partner violence because not everybody lives together. People are even dating and are abusers. So they sort of changed that name for that reason. This is just a list of the content, what the things I'm going to talk about, and feel free to interrupt me at any time that you want, and I'll answer questions for you. So somehow I need to minimize this for myself. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You can still hear me, right? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. I'm not going to read this word for word because I will not insult your intelligence. But a lot of my information I get off of one particular website. It's the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. It's a very good site. There's another good one called RAINN, RAINN, and that's for sexual assault victims. There's just a plethora of information out there on this if people care to look it up. But I think sometimes it gets pushed under the carpet because it is just such an old, domestic violence goes back to biblical times, and we still haven't figured out how to fix it. Hopefully, the more education that people have about it, the more aware they will be. I think that is the big thing, is awareness. People need to understand what is going on. They need to understand what their partner is doing to them. Some people just think it's normal. They may have been raised in an abusive home or anything else, and they think it's just the way things should be, and it is not. So it's education more than anything. I can remember, and this is in the book, I don't know if I have it in here or not, but we used to do a youth group. We used to run a youth group many years ago back in Pennsylvania where we lived. And there was a senior high school girl, and she was dating a boy that was a year younger than her. And he was just not very nice. I mean, he just wasn't very nice in general. And she came to me and told me that he was hitting her. And I said, you got to get out of there. I said, this does not get better. And she didn't. And by the time we left to come down here in North Carolina, as far as I know, were still together. But I kept telling her, this does not get better. And she had a good mom. I said, you need to go and share this with your mom. She'll understand and she'll be able to help you. Well, I don't know if that happened, but I do know that she's not married to that man. I don't know whether she ever was or whether she got smart and got out of it, but she does have another partner now. I did look her up, so that was good to know. But it starts then. Dating, especially sexual assault in colleges, is a major problem. No offense to the guys in here, because I know you guys, I'm sure, are not like this, neither is my husband, but there are some men and boys, boy men, that just think they have the right. I mean, it's a testosterone thing. It's a societal thing. It's been accepted for so long, the dominance and subservience of men and women, that they just think it's okay. And some people still think that. I shouldn't get a kick out of it. I shouldn't say that, but I smile when I post something on my blog about this, and I send it out I boost it, which means it goes out to everybody, people I don't know. And some of the men I get, not very often, but every once in a while, I will get a comment from a man, a really nasty comment. And I will just say, did it hit a nerve? And then they get ugly and I just delete them. But it is a problem. So let's see. And this is what blew my mind when I was in training, which was, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. I was in Rocky Mount at the time. I was working in the Rocky Mount ER. And my head nurse came up to me and said, hey, how would you like to put away bad guys? I said, hey, that sounds pretty cool. What do you do? I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But there were two of us that were in the first class of forensic nurses in North Carolina. So it was an amazing, intense course that, I mean, it's probably one of the best educational experiences I've ever had. But it was also, of course, very gut-wrenching. And the statistics back then were that every 5 seconds, an intimate partner is physically assaulted. Now it's every 3. And if you run through the statistics, that's a lot of people. That is a lot of people, and things that add to it are alcohol use, drug use, guns. All of that stuff just makes it worse. So, and the problem is women and men. Men are victims too. I was writing for health articles for a magazine in Canada, an online newspaper rather, in Canada. And I was telling my editor about this book I was writing, and he said, women aren't the only victims. And he just proceeded to tell me about his situation, his brother's situation. And I thought, he's right. And I knew that, but we just always think women are the victims, and they are for the most part. But we cannot forget that men are too. So, and neither one of them, many people are reluctant to come forward because of many, many things. They're afraid of them. They have no place to go. They can't support themselves. They will have no source of income. I mean, it's so easy for us to say, just get out of there, just leave. And many times I have felt like that too when I'm dealing with some of the women. But, you learn as a nurse not to say what you think, because, it's kind of gets in trouble sometimes. But, you try to help as much as you can. And we'd give them all the suggestions. We would collect the evidence and take all the pictures and everything we needed to send the evidence to the police, which is what forensic nurses do. And 9 times out of 10, they didn't file charges, or they got dropped because the guys came back and, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. And they believe them and so forth, or they plea bargain out. And so the only time I ever had to go to court was on a little girl, a 5-year-old little girl. She was smart as a whip, that kid. And those are the ones that got to me, the kids. The kids are the ones that just put a pit in my stomach. And this little girl was so smart, and she was so consistent. And a lot of times the kids, things don't get prosecuted because they're inconsistent. It's his word against hers. Many times it's not a physical thing where you see evidence of physical assault. It's just the touching thing. And of course, there's no proof of that. But this little kid, she was totally consistent right down the line, and she put that guy away. I'm sure he's been out for years now, but at least we knew something worked. So, where did I go too far? Okay. And there you go. Anybody can be victims. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, what sex you are, what religion you are, what anything. I mean, you name it, it doesn't matter. It crosses all lines of socioeconomic levels and races and religions. You just don't know. You just don't know. I'm thinking it's changing now from what it used to be, but a long time ago, we
Pat,
would,
your audio's gotten really weird for me, at least. Is anyone else having trouble? So you changed something around your desk and it's warbling. So there you go.
Is that
Talk
better?
again. Yeah.
Okay, I think I was moving around is probably what I was doing. But anyway, here's the next one. I got called out on this, that I did this for my nursing school up in Pennsylvania when the book came out. And I was invited to speak to the nursing school and the staff. So I did, and I got called out on this, and I had to agree with them. Not all abusers are narcissistic. It is a very common trait with abusers, but they are not all like this. So I have to make sure that I do touch on that now because I was corrected. But narcissistic people, and this man in my book was classic narcissist. They don't think they can do anything wrong. It's a very hard personality conflict to resolve because they don't know that they do anything wrong. They think it's everybody's fault. They can take no responsibility for what they do. The whole world revolves around them. And again, we talked about a little about that, drugs and alcohol abuse, men, the caveman mentality. They're also very jealous and possessive, which is one of the big triggers for these guys. And they are explosive, and you'll see later it's a cycle. And I have that down there too, but it's a cycle of abuse. And again, they have learned it in childhood. They're very controlling. Where are you going? What are you doing? What are you spending your money on? What time will you be home? Who are you with? Making all the decisions for them, for the other partner, thinking they're always right. And they're able to get in your head. They need to have the power. They need to have the power and the control. But outside, and I've heard this not just from my client here, but also in my experience as a forensic nurse, outside the home, he's a model citizen. Everybody loves them. I will have to stop using the male gender. Everybody loves them. In her case, he was a block superintendent. He was a coach, a sports coach for his boys. He was into everything in the community, and nobody had any idea of what he was like behind closed doors, except the ones that he went out and partied and did drugs with. They knew him and they loved him because he was lots of fun for them. So it's just hard for people to know when they see that side of a person, that there is like a Jekyll and Hyde. There's one person here and one person someplace else. And it's not uncommon for them to be there. And that's just why I put which one will be coming through the door tonight. They don't know. And they're frightened because they don't know what's going to be coming through the door. So portrait of a victim, low self-esteem, feels worthless. A lot of the stuff that I have said. And also, this is, I think, a big thing. I know it was for her, and for even if you watch the TV shows, some of these people have not been loved as much as they should be. They don't know what real love is. They've been deprived of the love of a mother or a father. Or it may have been an abusive love. So that's what they think. I mean, any attention is better than none at all, even if it's bad attention. And some of these people have never experienced the love that they need. And they're socially awkward sometimes. They want to please everybody, and which is perfect for the abuser, because the abuser wants power and control, and the victims want to please everybody. So, I mean, it's just a symbiotic relationship for both of them until it isn't, until it goes bad. And, I have to say that in some relationships, that works. I don't want to sound like I'm going against myself by saying that, but as long as it's not a physical or an extreme emotional thing, if the woman or a man likes to wait on the other person and they're okay with it, or, it can work. But when it gets pathologic, then that is a real problem. So I don't mean to say that everybody who is like that cannot work it out with somebody, but you have to just be careful where that line gets crossed. No blueprint for love. She loved that. That's my husband's thing, because we often say we didn't have great role models as parents. And he would often say, we just had no blueprints for parenting. And when I told my client that, she thought that was great. So that's in there. There's no blueprint for love. They can be immigrants with language barriers, traditional blood. We talked about that before. And in her case too, insecure, she thinks she thought everything she did was wrong, which just fed right into him because he told her everything was wrong with her and she believed him. And that's kind of the way it went. And they started out as just verbal, and that's quite common. I would hear people say, but he doesn't hit me. It's just, he's just not nice to me. He doesn't hit me. He makes me feel bad. But it does escalate. Just because it has started there doesn't mean that at one point there's not going to be a trigger that's going to set him over or her over the edge and create that abusive personality, that abusive part of that relationship. And they think they can change them. I mean, how many people, whether they're abusers or not, how many people do you know that maybe don't have the most desirable life partner, but they think, oh, well, I can change them. I know I can. Nurses are terrible about this because we just think, a lot of nurses are drawn to men that are like that because we want to be needed and we think we can change everybody. And it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you can help people that change each other when you have things that need to be changed for each other. But for something like this, it's very difficult to change an abuser like that. Many impacts on intimate partner violence, not just physical, but the physical, that may not be temporary. It might be temporary, just a lot of bruises and scratches, broken bones, but it can also cause things that last for a very long time, even heart problems, blood pressure. So just because they've been in the hospital with injuries and they send them home and they're all better, that doesn't mean that they are, either physically or emotionally, because it can cause long-term effects on that. And of course, the emotional, I don't even have to say anything about that. It's just an awful piece. It's an awful piece. They may lose work from their job, so it could be economic. They either won't go to work because of bruises. They won't go to work because of depression. They won't go to work because they can't, because they have been hurt that badly, and they lose time. They lose their job, and the abusers sometimes like that because sometimes they don't want people to go to work because they don't want them talking about what's going on at home. Isolation is a very big factor like that, and sometimes they would rather just have them at home under their thumb so they know what they're doing, where they're going, who they're talking to, so they know that their dirty little secrets are not being shared with everybody and his brother out there in the world. but cost of medical and psychological counseling, it's an economic drain on some people. And this is what threw me to this one, that intimate partner violence costs the US economy anywhere between 5.8 and $12.6 billion annually. That kind of blew my mind too. I mean, you know a lot of these things, but when I see a statistic like that, it just kind of makes you sit up and go, wow. Children, of course, the children of abusers and their spouses, or even children themselves who are being abused, they may have, because abuse is abuse. And many of the things are the same across the line. Children, elderly people, I did an article on elderly abuse as well. It's the same across the line, but there are definite unique differences between each of the types of abuses that there are. But with children, they become abusers. They may become abusers themselves. They may have learning problems. There's just so many different things, so much more than you would think. Or at least that, I really thought until I got into this, things you just don't think about, the impacts like this. 1 in 2 female murder victims and 1 in 13 male murder victims are killed by intimate partners. And that's another thing that I was surprised. These are all the little signs and symptoms. You can certainly read those on your own, but these are triggers. These aren't all the triggers. These are the characteristics, and these are the things to watch for, as much as the triggers will come later. But the moodiness, their moods all the time. And again, I talked a lot about that earlier. Do they spy on you? This man, my client's husband here, he bugged the house. He bugged the house. He put a camera on the wall. He stole her checkbook. He cut up her credit cards. She had nothing. Her mother had to give her money to go out and get groceries. And he spied on her. He sure did. And there were a lot of drugs involved. There was alcohol, you name it. I mean, he was unfaithful. He went out and partied. You want a soap opera? This is a soap opera here, and it's not a good one. If they threaten, it might just be hot air, but it might not. So these are all the things that to watch for. These are the triggers. And I think all of these things you can easily understand. Suspicion is a big one, whether or not the person is being unfaithful. It's suspicion is a big one. And also, if they are being unfaithful, they're going to suspect their partner more, because they have those feelings of guilt, if that's possible for people like this. But a cheater is usually more likely to suspect a partner than a non-cheater. So, but things out of place, oh man, she couldn't have anything out of place. If there was one little thing, she was terrified, absolutely terrified of it. So these are all things that can cause problems. And here's your cycle. Something triggers it. They're like stovepipes. It's like you keep shoving the soot down and shoving the soot down, and all of a sudden there's no more soot that can go down. And that works both ways. That happens with the abusers, and they just explode. That happens with victims, and they react. It's with people in general. There's just so much you can push down into that stovepipe before nothing fits anymore. So they explode, and that's when the abuse starts. And then, of course, they come back with the remorse, the apologies, the flowers, the dinners, the this and that, and everything's going to be better. I'll never do it again. I mean, it is just famous last words. I'll never do it again. I promise you I'll never do it again. And I think, honestly, they mean it when they say it. I really do. I think they mean it. Some of them anyway. I don't think they want to do it again, but it happens. It just does. It's an addiction like anything else. So But there may be a period of calm in between there, and then something happens and it just sets them off again. And these are all the things. I mean, look over these things. How many times, or if you know of anybody, why do you stay? Just leave, just get out. Well, it just is not that easy. It is not that easy. Easy to say, a whole lot easier to understand. No one knows what goes behind those beautiful walls. And there's a little piece in the front of the book. Oh, the reason the book is called The Prettiest House on the Block is because she wrote a little poem, I guess, prose one time, and I included it in the front of the book. And she said, even if you live in the prettiest house on the block. And they did. They had a gorgeous house. He made money. Most of it went up his nose, but he did make a lot of money. And they lived well. Nobody thought anything that was going on. So we cannot be judgmental. If we don't know what's going on behind those walls, we just can't be judgmental. And it's hard not to be, especially when there repeats and they just keep coming in. And that was the most frustrating thing, when I got the same people in over and over again. And that was the most frustrating part. And they just wouldn't leave. And all of these reasons, you pick one, could be all of them, why they don't leave. Many reasons.
We have just about 5 more minutes. I just wanted to give you a heads up about timing.
Oh, perfect, because I think we're almost done. Okay, you can, the other ones aren't as important, but this is good. Be prepared, have an escape plan, make sure you have a strong escape system. All of these things you can read. And I think you have a copy of this anyway. And you see, these are just the end, and there's the help that you can go for. And right there, be observant, look for bugs like I was talking about, be patient, hide the book. I told you about the Kindle, and just pay attention. And if you know somebody, just encourage them, be there. That's the best you can do. Tell them to get help. You can point them to places. There's plenty of places for help, but keep yourself safe. I have to say that. Help your friend if they need it, but you've got to keep yourself safe. That is the first thing. That's the most important thing. So whether you may think so or not, it is. And you can't help them if you're not safe yourself. So okay, I think we covered just about everything. Anyway, anybody have any questions? No?
We're all muted, so we may have forgotten. So
Okay.
I know that some of us have experience in this arena and may have heard much of this before, but I'm sure there's other questions or people that you've wondered. So we'll want to get your slides, or at least maybe you can put it in chat if you know how to do that, the hotline, so that, and so let's say we assume that our neighbor has an issue. How do we approach the subject with someone that we think may be in a tough situation?
I think the first thing to do is try to get them alone in neutral territory, at a restaurant or something, or, maybe your house, but they tend to get suspicious of, if somebody would be coming to your house and spending a long time talking, they may be suspicious of that, and that may put you in danger. So my recommendation would be to meet them in a public place, but private enough that you can talk to that person. And they may not at first open up to you. They may not. You may just have to be there and send them a card once in a while, or a phone call, see how they're doing, something like that, because they may not be willing to open up. Or you can even slip them a little. One thing we used to use a long time ago when we worked with the youth, there was something called the Yellow Ribbon Program, and it was for youth suicide. It was for teen suicide. And they had cards made up, and all they had to do, it was the information that they needed and for help. And all they had to do was hand it to somebody. They didn't even have to tell them. They just had to hand it to an adult, and the adult would know what was going on. So maybe something like that. Give her a card, or index card, or even a little business card with some information on it, and just give it to them and say, if you ever feel like you need help and you don't want to talk about it, hand me this card and we'll get you some help. But it's tough, it is. And again, keep yourself safe is as important. But those are the things that to just keep in touch with them, keep in contact. And when they're ready, they will come forward. Now, that being said, if there is if you see any kind of assault with a gun or a knife or this, I believe that it's in your right to report them. But again, if there's a weapon used, she has no choice in the matter to have him prosecuted. But if there's no weapon used, it's up to her or him. They don't have to press charges. And that's the other thing that's so frustrating. But if there's a lethal weapon involved, I think you have every right to call the police, because we had to. We had to call the police if there was a gun or a knife involved. So I would think that would be the same for you as well.
I'd just like to reinforce what you said about men also being the victim of domestic violence.
Yes.
A lifetime ago in my first marriage, I was subjected to physical domestic violence, and I still have the scars to this day. So it's not just women, although the majority is the women. I mean, looking at even the numbers you presented, but it does happen to men too. And I think we all need to be aware of that.
Yes. Yep. I totally agree. And I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm glad you got out of it. Because some people don't. So kudos to you. It sounds like you have a better one this time. Yeah. So, and I do in my on my blog, I wrote a series. I touch on the different things in the book. I touch on men as victims. I touch on same-sex relationships. I touch on dating victims, but I don't go into a whole lot. But on my blog, I have a WordPress blog, and it's called Lifelines. And I talk about all kinds of things, but that's where this all came about. Denise, Donna in the book, saw my blog, and I had like 4 different articles in the blog, and one was on domestic violence, one was on sexual assaults, one was on child abuse, one was on, but not even child abuse. I don't even think I did that. It was on that, men as victims and where to go for help, things like different topics on the same line. And she saw them and she wrote to me. She didn't know who I was, but she wrote to me, and knowing that I was doing this, and said, would you tell my story? And I looked at her name and I said, I will be happy to tell your story, but you need to know who I am. And she was just floored, excuse me. And we both decided, it was 13 years before that I had her husband as a patient. And so we just decided this was just, I mean, everything, I'm a firm believer in God. And I always hesitate to say that because I don't want to intrude on anybody else's beliefs, but that's my feeling. And we just really thought that was meant to be, that we did this. But my blog has a whole article on men as victims there. So if you're ever interested